Welcome back to One Comic Book a Day, where it's going to surprise no one that seeing that there is a actual Superman movie in the theaters that I'm going to want to talk about that Superman movie, because even though this series is called One Comic a Day, we are mainly focusing on Superman, so I can claim to be a Superman expert as I make that journey. And what better time to talk about a Superman movie when one is actually out in theaters? And my God, is it good? Thank God it's good. I have seen the movie now twice and have had a massive smile on my face. So, no, this isn't going to be me pulling apart the Superman movie, though I do have quite a few quibbles with it. It's actually because just how my mind works, I focus on negative way too easily. And I know people complain about that sometimes in this video series. But even when I'm talking about negatives in this, it's not like all that bad. It's just so good. In fact, my general statement on it is it's kind of not a movie. It is a movie. It's really more just a complaint for me that I really like plot and structure, and the movie doesn't have a lot of plot and structure. It exists, but it's so almost unnecessary, which you can get away with when you're a good filmmaker or storyteller. When it comes to, say, the Golden Age stories that we've been focusing on, they can't get away with ignoring the plot when they're not that great of storytellers. Not all of them. Some of them are actually pretty good storytellers, and I think they could experiment a little bit more if the art form had existed for a little bit longer. They're kind of failing when they're doing that. Gunn can get away with being James Gunn as the director and writer, can get away with being a mess because no matter what, even when there are problems with, say, not a lack of plot at times, not a lot of focus on the characters. There is character arcs, but not like really great scenes that build upon each other. You have like a scene that gets to that moment. And what Gunn's really good at is, even with a brevity of time, essentially with two scenes, making a character arc work. I mean, Superman even manages to have a character arc, and I don't even believe he should have one because he brings about character arcs in others, which is exactly what happens in this movie. God, he gets that. But what I really want to focus on is how sincere this movie is. When it comes to American blockbusters, there's been a move, well, it has been what American blockbusters are. They're either completely focused on the action and any sort of storytelling is very cynical and simple, or you have something more like a Ryan Reynolds, Dwayne Johnson movie. Maybe both of them in there where they're completely like winking the eye at the audience that they know this is a movie and none of this really matters. Movies can be very cynical and insincere in America, which is why when RRR came out, which was a fantastic action movie just on its own, the fact that it was super sincere and melodramatic about its moments and its characters, it felt so good compared to the last 20 to 30 years of American blockbusters. They're not sincere. Marvel movies can have sincerity in them, but at the same time, they can get dark or even very much a joke at the audience that, like, yeah, we know this is silly. We're going to point out it's silly and maybe not letting the silliness overrun it. The Guardians movies, which are Gunn, are probably better at that, but they still have sort of scenes where you have like a character laughing, not just a character, characters laughing at the name Taserface because, yeah, it's a silly name, but you don't have to like always put a lampshade on it. I am just so exhausted at the jokes of a character having a silly name and everybody having to point out, yeah, we get it's a silly name. There's something lovely about Superman that it kind of just exists with the silliness. Yeah, this is how that universe works. There are a few jokes at that expense. Like Guy Gardner makes fun of the name Mr. Terrific at one point, but also he's Guy Gardner. He's going to be a jerk about everybody's name. And my God, does Nathan Fillion, who people wanted to be Hal Jordan, and he's voiced Hal Jordan in several animated adaptations, nail Guy Gardner, the pompous buffoon of Green Lantern. So good in that, in what little he gets to do. But Superman is a big, cheesy, earnest character, and this movie is deeply earnest. It's so lovely. It doesn't want to stand there and take like the piss out of the character before moving on. Like, you all get this as silly, right? It revels in the silliness and the dorky earnestness of the character. And that's just such a breath of fresh air in an American blockbuster, because God, are they cynical. Like, every single time I see the new trailers from Fantastic Four, which I'm still kind of excited about, The whole idea that the Thing doesn't like to say it's clobbering time because, yeah, it's clobbering time is a silly thing to say. And it's going to be an arc. Of course, he's going to say it at a big moment. It's just, I want that universe to be at a point where he can just say it's clobbering time without us having to put in the work of, well, it's a silly thing to say. We can't just let him say it all the time. The only one of these in Marvel I really like that works is the whole like who's on first joke in the first Doctor Strange when he's trying to introduce himself to Caecilius. If they were all more like that and less like Peter Parker laughing at the name Dr. Otto Octavius. It's not really a joke. It just ha 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 silly name. No, really. What is your name? Oh. And there's never like a backtrack of like how insulting that is if you had a silly name. It's just like, oh, so you just have a silly name. I'm just going to continue being a dick to you about that. And Peter Parker is not Guy Gardner, thank God. Though he had a terrible haircut in Ultimate Comics for a long time. Oh, man. But I hope this leads to some more sincerity in American blockbusters. And I think, especially in the time we are now, why Superman kind of came in and worked. It's sort of the movie we need. And just on it being sincere feels revolutionary. Gunn seems to really love being in a comic book universe. It's what he's really good at. There's a want by fans that a filmmaker should love comics. And there's been a lot of good comic book movies made by filmmakers who are not comic book fans. I mean, Christopher Nolan is not truly all that of a comic book fan. That's why David Goyer was involved. There's also been bad movies by filmmakers who weren't good filmmakers who loved comic books. See the original Fantastic Fours or Daredevil, the movie. That's by a really big comic book fan, but he wasn't a very good filmmaker. You kind of want both. Or at the very least, you want a good filmmaker. Gunn is a good filmmaker. He's a great storyteller, and he loves comics, and he sincerely loves all these characters, no matter how ridiculous said character is. And it's infectious when he's really delivering it. And I think that's ends up being why Guardians, a comic series that has a raccoon and a talking tree, works. He loves those characters. He doesn't stand there and make fun of the fact that they are a tree and a raccoon. He moves beyond it. He makes them characters. So you have, Superman being earnest, but you can also have Mr. Terrific being just wonderfully stoic. It's amazing that Mr. Terrific really steals quite a bit of this movie. And it's lovely to see because I do love Mr. Terrific and he doesn't get a lot of love. He's one of those characters that they try to give a comic book series and it's not successful. Probably at the worst is Martian Manhunter, and God, would I love some Martian Manhunter right now. You can take that sexually if you want. Martian Manhunter, but I would really love some love to him. And there's a reason they're talking about giving him a show. I love for him to get a movie just for the hell of it. It's Mr. Terrific. Isn't that kind of wild that people enjoy Mr. Terrific enough that we might actually get more Mr. Terrific content? What a world we're living in. The movie is political in a way that it should be. It's fascinating to me because we live in a world where any little thing is up for debate, a discussion, when it shouldn't. So you essentially have not Russia invading, not Gaza. Yeah, he basically does the Russian-Ukraine conflict and the Israeli-Gaza conflict and combines them into one thing. And you have that wonderful scene where Lois is talking to Clark, interviewing him specifically as Superman, where she tries to kind of have that debate about Superman stopping that war. And there is, sort of problems as my jokes when I cover these comics about you can't really stop the God-Man. There's definitely something to look at about Superman basically forcing his will on people. But he is not wrong that it's not up for debate. What they're doing is wrong. I'm going to stop it. It's nice having sort of the adult finally in these situations. He won't even deign to have the debate. No, people were going to die. So I made sure that doesn't happen. And that is wonderful that he's like, no, people dying, horrible acts being committed on groups of people is not something that is up for debate. I will stop it. We are not going to go through with this. And that is Superman. He is supposed to inspire us to be better. Remember, do good unto others, and every man can be a Superman. You've noticed this has absolutely no form as I'm just talking about how wonderful this movie is. It has big emotional moments, even without it being built. You may think I'm going to complain about the Jarrell of it all. There are spoilers I should have said very early on. I'm spoiling this, so if you haven't seen it and you don't want anything spoiled, stop now. But a big twist in the movie that works for what they're doing in the movie is that Jarrell and Lara were awful. They want him to conquer Earth and essentially have a hashtag secret harem. It doesn't annoy me as much as you think. Them being awful doesn't exactly change things radically, as it is to say have Brainiac or some other alien destroy Krypton and having someone for him to punch, because I think that kind of misses the point of Superman. Them being awful isn't that big of a departure. In fact, Jor-El since Rebirth has been kind of a dick and not great. Krypton itself wasn't great. It was isolationist and seemed to have massive xenophobia over the years. So Krypton and his parents not being great is fine. It works for what's being told, and the movie allows itself to really revel in the Jonathan Kent and what he has to teach to Clark, and Clark just being a good person. That is what this movie is trying to teach. You just need to be a good person, and you will help inspire people to be better. Hey, remember, do good unto others, and every man can be a Superman. As I mentioned, there are arcs, so his arc is about him coming to terms with that. It's not a great arc. He doesn't really change all that much. It like hits him hard, but he doesn't really change all that much in the story. But his noble example does change others, like our sort of militaristic justice gang, who are really more like the JLI, being inspired at the end to save Javanpur when they don't want to do that because they are inspired by example. Though I will nitpick, Superman doesn't kill exactly in this movie. He does allow his clone to get knocked into a black hole. Not a huge fan of that. And when the big monster thing gets killed, he doesn't put up a big fight about that. I feel like the Superman I know and love would have tried harder to stop it when he saw Mr. Terrific doing it. But he's not happy about it, and at least we get that. Gunn kind of gets away with a bit of murder with Hawk Girl, like dropping the not Russia president to his death. There's definitely, if it's not Superman, we kind of allow it. I kind of wish that had went away. And if I'm going to nitpick something very seriously, though it really works as a moment that inspires some change, and it does hit very hard and really show us how awful Lex is. I could have done without the brown Muslim man being shot and killed to really inspire arcs. It's not technically fridging, but it's a lot like fridging. The version of my Superman would have probably found a way to save him in that moment. Some good stuff comes out of it. I'm just saying maybe it wasn't worth that death. That horrible, horrible death for that to happen. Man, that's really derailed everything. It kind of derails the movie in a way. Also, my biggest complaint when it always comes to action is Superman can do a lot, so you got to make things harder. And what makes something harder than Superman trying to escape a pocket dimension, flowing in a positron river, heading into a black hole while being attacked by numerous different guys in mech suits while trying to protect a mutant baby? That is making something hard. You just kind of pile up things on him. And notice, it's something that's hard because he's trying to save someone. This movie very much focuses on Superman constantly trying to save people. In fact, he saves a squirrel at one point. Wonderful. Krypto would probably kill that squirrel later, especially how that's set up. But he stops to save people. It's really focused on sort of the people around him more than the action until like the final act when it does kind of become a big blockbuster CGI fest. Not its strongest thing, but I do enjoy the black hole of it all and the moments kind of building into it. And it still hits very hard when he finally like turns it around and him and Krypto are beating all the Raptors. But a lot of what Gunn wants to show us is like how the rest of the world, who have sort of grown up in a universe where metahumans exist. God, I love that we exist in a very comic book universe. I've said this multiple times to people, but this Superman movie really captures the feeling of like a new creative team taking over a random issue of Superman, like issue 113. Suddenly there's a new creative team and sort of you get a little bit of introduction, but you're running right into a Superman story. And I kind of like everyone's performance here. They kind of hit it pretty well. There are some nitpicky things, like with Lois. There's nothing wrong with her performance. The movie just doesn't give her a lot to do. In fact, the movie doesn't really seem to care about the Clark Kent disguise or the Daily Planet. A lot of the Daily Planet stuff is sort of perfunctory. Though I do enjoy them all on the ship. I'm actually kind of shocked that Gunn resisted having Steve Lombard pull a prank on Clark. Maybe there was a cut scene there, but that felt like something that was obviously going to happen as soon as he was going to have Lombard in the story. But Lois doesn't get a lot to do. My partner, when I saw this with her the second time, she didn't see it the first time, asked me, well, how would you make Lois more involved? And I would have probably had her more involved in saving him in the prison and not just kind of bring Mr. Terrific there to help. I feel like Lois deserves like a moment where she saves Superman. That's kind of a big thing. She's also pretty wary. She's very smart, and Rachel Brosnahan is great in that role, and something that really works for this. And I wish there was more of. Gail Simone said a few years ago, if you're going to make a Superman movie, it should be a romance movie. The original Superman movie is very much a romance between Clark and Lois. That whole scene, which is surprisingly horny, she asks him what color her panties are, and he just goes with it. Should be like a romance, and there's not a lot of like true romance here. They're already together, but their chemistry is really good. You can see that in their interviews together. You really believe these two really like each other. But there's not a lot for her to exactly do in the story. And she's not like running into trouble. She never quite gets into like some sort of stupid situation that that if Superman didn't exist, she would probably be dead. And there's been a lot of criticism towards Luthor. I think it's because Nicholas Holt's Luthor isn't very much like that calm diplomat Luthor. He's still kind of calm. He works for me because he actually captures the Jeff Johns, Grant Morrison Luthor very well. That overconfident, envious Luthor. In fact, the one thing he probably wouldn't do, but it doesn't bother me, is he actually admits that he's jealous of Superman. To me, especially in several moments of Morrison and Johns' Luthor, and I've said this before, feels like he's teetering on a full-blown tantrum over the fact he can't fly. And that is definitely here at times. But he's also just very smart. There is something that I'm pretty sure is inspired, because a lot of this story is inspired by All-Star Superman. Gunn admitted that from the beginning, where he can completely estimate how Superman's going to fight and is just yelling fight moves to control what ends up being, I guess, match. Ultraman turns out to be a clone. There have been a lot of theories and rumors that he was a clone that possibly turned into Bizarro. He doesn't become Bizarro unless he comes back. There is like a whole thing where he keeps saying the word match. Match is a bad clone of Superboy, not Superman, unless I'm forgetting something. So it is kind of interesting that it's a Superboy villain in a way. But he's not actually the villain. He's just something there to allow Luthor to hit. But he's very smart. And I think he really captures that Luthor so well. So I'm not going to complain about that role. I think it hits the type of Luthor I actually really like. Would have I liked the sort of like business acumen, very confident Luthor? Yeah, that would have been good, but I really like what we got with him. And the whole argument at the end where Superman makes his pretty much big thing that though he is an alien immigrant, he is human. This is something that came up. I really love how Paul Cornell sort of phrased it when he was doing his Luthor run in Action Comics, when Action Comics ended before the New 52, that because of how Superman was raised, though he is not a human per se, he is not a Earthman, he is maybe our most human superhero, mainly because of how he's brought up and how he thinks. While Luthor is a character who doesn't care about human life and is, in a way, not human. But if you want to get into Luthor, and sometimes Luthor depicted in movies, and thank God he's not depicted here that way. Both the Kevin Spacey and Jesse Eisenberg Luthors had this whole like philosophy 101 thing where they would just spout philosophy. And the Morrison Luthor especially doesn't seem to really get philosophy. I don't remember if it's in the comic, but in the animated version of All-Star Superman, when he's told that the truth sent him away, he's very confused and starts like demanding, what is truth? You can't feel it. You can't hold it in your hand or measure it. And you kind of get in that moment, oh yeah, he doesn't really get philosophy. It's not something that's tangible. he wouldn't care. To me, Luther is not a very philosophical character, but philosophy is a really easy thing to write to make a character seem smart. But this Luther doesn't get bogged down in that. And what you can really get into the philosophy of it is that Luther doesn't value human life and doesn't see people who are lesser than him as people, and in a way that doesn't make him human. Superman is more human than Luther, and if you tried to explain this to Luther, he wouldn't get it because he would just be focusing on the fact that, yeah, he is a man born on the planet. So technically, in a measurable way, he's human while Superman isn't. But Superman is way more human than him because of who he is and how he behaves and how he treats people. God, that's good. And it's a good little message at the end. A little undone by the fact that Crypto then tries to maul him to death. And I haven't talked about Crypto. I kind of wish he wasn't animated throughout this and there had been a real dog for a little bit, but he is fantastic. I mean, there's not a lot you can really say about it other than he really gets that whole sort of shelter dog. I'm not going to focus on Crypto because he's a lot of fun. He doesn't actually get a lot of character work, but it is amazing that when Superman he turns himself in and specifically says something around the lines that he thinks he's going to get the dog, and though he's not a very good dog, he's alone and probably afraid. And that is why Superman is willing to put himself through hell to save that dog once again. And I'm actually rolling up at that idea. But here's something I really want to make a bit on, and this is a massive spoiler. It's what's been sort of eating at me more than anything in this movie. And I thought it was going to be the hypno glasses. Hypno glasses annoy me because it's a stupid thing that even the writer who introduced the hypno glasses into Superman, like if you want to like a really strong explanation of why no one recognizes him in his disguise, you're kind of focusing on the wrong thing. You're missing the forest for the trees. He's a character who can fly and deflect bullets, and what's annoying you is the fact that you don't think glasses is a good disguise. Gain some perspective. The hypno glasses were always a bad idea, but at least it's not focused on. It's actually more of a joke about how ridiculous it is. We'll see if we get more of the Superman if that comes into play and it annoys me. It's not something I would hate. It's just something that kind of annoys me. But the thing that's been eating at me is the ending. If you weren't aware, the very end where, spoilers, Supergirl shows up because she's the next one, is very much setting up the next Supergirl movie. In fact, it is aggressively explaining the whole idea that she goes to other planets with red sun, so she doesn't have powers that allows her to drink and get drunk, because with the yellow sunlight giving her powers and Superman powers, they can't get drunk. Now, the next movie, which is Supergirl, which I believe is done filming, is based on Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which is a comic where that comes into play. She's getting drunk on a run-sun planet that's in the medieval age of itself when bad things happen. In fact, Crypto is poisoned and he's going to die unless Supergirl does something, which is a really annoying part of that plot. That comic is great, but like they give the Crypto is going to die, which should have like a time frame to it. But then she kind of like leaves and is gone for what is seems to be weeks or months. So did it really matter? Also, I'm pretty sure the way that power should work is if Crypto is brought into the yellow sun, the powers being restored should negate the poison in him. But whatever. But what annoys me about this is because the whole thing is made about Superman's family being awful. Do people not know Supergirl exists? Because you would feel like she would also be talked about in those news reports. Is she there to conquer with us? Is she secretly in his harem or something? But the other thing, traditionally, Supergirl's origin is that she was sent as a teenager and got lost in space. So she grew up quite a bit on Krypton and is very confused by Earth. And when she arrives thinking she's going to be protecting baby Clark, Clark is now an adult and having to help her coming to terms with living on Earth, which is a twist on what she thought was going to be happening. So if she has grown up and we assume knew her aunt and uncle, wouldn't she know what the rest of that message probably said? Like, I feel she knew what type of people Jor-El and Mara were, right? And this has been nagging at me. Maybe this gets explained. Maybe there's a twist. She was also sent as a baby. Though, seeing how she behaves, I'm curious how she was raised. She calls him super bitch. Wonderful. And probably a really great building point on her arc in that story, because she doesn't really have an arc. She's way more stoic in that story. But I'm really excited to see what they do with that adaptation. especially with what they decided to build on. But it's the thing that's been eating at me. It's not really important, but just like, shouldn't she know what kind of people Jarrell was? Oh, this is going on for too long, and I think I've kind of hit everything I really wanted to talk about here. You should go see this movie, and I want to see it like 3 more times already. What really works is it feels like the DC universe, and a DC universe that exists and just is, and not something that has to, be brought down by a lot of choices, and is happy with the campy corniness of a DC universe. So yeah, I really like Superman and hope this is what that DC universe is going to be, because if it can keep up this sort of feeling and tone, God, is it going to be wonderful. Okay, that is it for this video. I will be back on Wednesday talking about whatever Superboy comic book we're on. I think actually the first Superboy issue, which I recorded and something went wrong with the recording. Hopefully nothing goes wrong with this recording. I have to record this. Let's end with that question. Whatever did happen to the Man of Tomorrow? Okay, have a pleasant day.